I don't always pick the music to start things out. I'm kind of digging that a little bit this morning. Hey, thanks for joining us today. Before we jump into what this kind of 4-week conversation is going to be about, I just want to let you know about something that's coming up. So each year we have a 5K that takes place right here in Surprise Way, runs down the green belt, comes back. It's great for runners, great for walkers, just great for community, and it supports our Kenya partnership. So this summer we're sending a team to work with our education and city partners in Kenya, and it's a great way to raise funds. So bid registrations go towards that. There's a chance to step in and sponsor if you're a company owner or work for a business that would like to come in and support that. So I just want to encourage you. I want to get that on your radar. The race will take place on May 23rd, all right? So if you're like, I don't have time to train, you got a few weeks to get in there, but you don't have to race. I mean, you look at me and you're like, I can't beat that guy, right? But actually, no, you looked at me and most of you were like, is he going to do the 5K? But you can walk it. You can walk with friends. If you got little ones, you can push a stroller, whatever you need to do, but we'd love for you to come out. And so if you go to eastern.life, you'll see the sign up for that. It's a great community event. And then if you visit the kiosk, you'll see about sponsorship opportunities for your companies or your business to kind of get the name of who you work for behind a great event. So have that on your radar. You're going to hear a lot more about it coming forward. But I want to tell you a little bit about where we're going in this 4-week series. It's called That's on Me. There's a bit of an iteration or a backstory for it, but I want to be really upfront at the beginning and say it might sound a little bit like a self-help series or something about productivity, maybe like behavior management. These are all important things to think about in our lives, but it's really a series about love. And I hope I can connect those dots for you as we walk through it. And that might sound a little bit weird even. As you look at it, you're like, what's that got to do with love? And the idea I want us to think about, and for me at least, it's an idea that I get a little uncomfortable. I'd rather, honestly, that this was called That's on You. And we just spent 4 weeks talking about kind of how we end up navigating so many relationships for us. And instead, the core thing is this. We're going to ask for 4 weeks, what do I owe? As a human being, in my life, in my relationships, in my community, in my work, in my church, what do I owe? And I'll explain a little bit about where I want to go with that. But what do I owe? Not as in debt, but what do I owe? Not as in money, but what I owe as a person to you. What do you owe to the person you're sitting next to your neighbors, to your family, to your coworkers, to people who have wronged you, and to people that you've wronged. And it's interesting. So I didn't write a book about it, just so you know. And you buy it in the lobby afterwards. But I will tell you, this week is my 6-year anniversary at Eastwind. April 15th, I became Eastwind's lead pastor. I didn't live in Idaho yet. I think those of you who were here during that time, might still be weird for you. You're like, how did this happen? But the first phone call I received was from a guy named Mike McCarg. Mike's actually in the building right now. He said, hey, this is Mike McCarg from Eastwind Community Church. Just reaching out, want to talk about what's happening at our church. And Mike is so I Googled him. I'm like, who's this Mike McCarg character? And I found Mike's a phenomenal leader. He coaches and works with groups, and Mike wrote a book called That's on Me. So I said, can I use your logo for the series? Because this book is actually all about, in the work world, how to be accountable and how to learn from your mistakes and take responsibility and really be an incredible employer, incredible boss, incredible company owner, incredible entrepreneur. And so it just made sense. If this is true when you go to work, there's got to be truth when we go to our faith and how that plays out. So the whole series, you'll see That's on Me, That's on Me. We have to brand a series, so I just thank Mike for making it super easy for us in the process. And the picture kind of gives the whole story, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to counteract maybe, or I am at least, this two competing ideas in our minds. One is, I'll call it the cultural message. I'm not a cultural warrior. I'm just saying there's a message out there that kind of goes, you need to protect yourself. You have to guard your peace. You need to set boundaries. Everyone all agree with that, right? These are can be genuinely healthy things. But somewhere in the midst of that, I've just noticed in my own life and in the dialogue around us, there's this question that's lost. And the question's not, how am I doing? How am I doing, my sense of self? It's, what have I left undone? Who's carrying something right now that I put down so they had to pick it up? That's going to kind of be for 4 weeks what we're going to explore, right? So it's about responsibility. I'm going to ask you a question. At the front end, we always do a question. Get to turn to your neighbor. Listen, if you're sitting next to someone alone, if you're all total introverts, that's fine. Enjoy your aloneness. But if one of you is an extrovert, break the silence and bring everybody together and spend a minute talking about this. Right? How would you personally define responsibility? We'll be back in 1 minute.
You've been running, but you want somewhere to stay. Black bandana, but your face can't hide the pain. I'm not scared of all the things you're scared to say. I gotta know who you are. I gotta know who you are. I gotta need to call. Come on. And I got plenty of space inside my heart. Been forever since you felt like this again. You stay gonna keep your heart from caving in. I saw you at the Queensbridge pigeons. You don't wanna spring.
Hey, take 10 seconds.
I know you in the background singing, but you can't go.
All right. Responsibility, right? So I'm going to take a stab at this real quick, and I'm certainly not an expert in being responsible. Maybe I should say that up front. I'm not an expert in saying that's on me. I'm more prone to say that's on you. But I do think we can put responsibility in two buckets and just kind of go, look, there's two ways to look at this, right? The first kind of responsibility is the kind with consequences attached, right? Pretty straightforward. Like the bill you have to pay, and if you don't, your power gets shut off. Or you show up late for work and you get in trouble with your boss. I mean, many of those are oversimple examples. The text you have to respond to, follow up to. Like we're generally fine, I think, when we go, there's a responsibility that if I don't do, there will be a consequence. I'm one of those like drive the car till it's empty kind of people. And my wife's like an end times prepper or something. She's like, you should always have gas in the car, right? And I'm like, why? I'll just get it the next morning unless there's an emergency and we have to. So that would be a responsibility with like immediate consequences attached. Fill up the gas tank, right? I'm still learning, right? Down the road on this one. There's a second kind of responsibility though. It's the kind with no immediate consequences. And that's going to be over 4 weeks, what we're really going to explore. That's the apology you haven't gone back to, the apology you haven't made. It's a pattern with your finances or your money that's quietly building pressure on the people closest to you. It's the health stuff you've been postponing. Like, you know, the annual physical comes around, you know what's coming, and then you kind of make some commitments and you just walk through it, right? It's a conversation with a kid or a parent or a spouse or partner, a roommate, a friend that keeps getting pushed to someday. Someday I'll get to this. A responsibility that has this like no immediate consequence. That's the tricky kind. But I think it's also the kind that's like right in the middle of where you and I live our lives. And that's kind of the territory that we're going to walk through when we say that's on me. And I think the challenge for me is I expect other people to be really responsible. Like, I expect that of you. Be a good citizen, be a good friend, be a good church member, whatever it is. Like, you need to be really responsible. And then when I myself, I've always talked about it this way. Like, if I'm pulling on to 84, right, off of 21, and there's a lot of traffic, and I'm having a really hard time getting in there, and no one lets me in, and I'm like, these jerks, this is Idaho, we're supposed to live here for pace of life, and they're in such a rush. What's wrong with them? They should move back to Wyoming or wherever they came from, right? And then, so the whole time I'm like, they're so irresponsible. And then when it's my turn and I'm stuck in the lane and I can't let anybody in, I'm like, oh, sorry, everybody. I got stuck here. I didn't mean to do this. You see how we tend to do that? How we tend to expect something from other people that's, I don't know, it's just a little harder to expect from ourselves. Or we're living in our shoes. I guess we have to give ourselves a pass more often. The challenge with all of this is if we're irresponsible in our lives, it doesn't just disappear. It actually relocates. This is really important. If you're a follower of Jesus, this is critical because the ethic and life of Jesus and what he calls us to walk into is all about responsibility. If you're not a follower of Jesus and you're on your journey or you have questions or you're a guest today, this is still really important. You want to work with people who are responsible. You want to date people who are responsible. You want your kids to be responsible. You want, don't we want this in our lives? And so irresponsibility doesn't just disappear, it relocates. Another way to say that would be that my irresponsibility eventually becomes someone else's responsibility. Just transfer it off my shoulders onto yours. I was thinking about a dynamic in this. There was a public, 1964, New York, there was this crime happened in public. Kitty Genovese was murdered, and they say about 30 people observed it happen. Okay, that was overblown. Times wrote about it. They came back and they peeled it back and they said there weren't that many witnesses, but there were witnesses. And when this event happened, it kind of sparked this question about the human interaction. Why would people see something unfold that they should feel a responsibility to defend or protect another human being, and then kind of turn a blind eye and stay quiet? And so two researchers set out to look at this in the early to mid 60s, and they discovered that when we're alone and someone needs help, we tend to act when we're alone. But the more people are present, the less we feel any individual responsibility. Everybody assumes someone else will handle it. This was kind of wild, so they took people and put them in lab situations and tested them. And one of the things they did is they put an individual in a room, and then someone in the room over would pretend to have a seizure. And if the individual is alone, they would act like, that's my responsibility now. I've got to step into that. But if there were 4 people present, their action went way down. These are kind of the details on it. If they were alone, 85% of you and I responded to the crisis. If there were 4 people present, that number dropped to 35. We all looked to the other person and went, well, they'll handle it. It's not my responsibility. And they call this the diffusion of responsibility. And I thought, as I was thinking about this series, I went, that's interesting. Because that's in a lab, right? They're exploring some things and they're kind of looking at how humans interact. And it is, I would contend, way more complex than just you want to or don't want to. There's a lot of factors that would play into that. But remove it from a lab and put it in my life. And what's at risk is a word that none of us really enjoy, would never want to be called. But if I'm not responsible, do I run the risk of being a hypocrite? And here's how I would define that. There's a lot of ways you could define a hypocrite. Someone who pretends to do, but doesn't do what they expect others around them to do. It's a simple way to think about it. So for 4 weeks, we're going to talk about how to kind of walk through our lives saying, that's on me. It's not on you. I'm going to take responsibility for things. I'm going to give people what I owe. I'm going to take care of what I owe. Here's where that comes from. I think it's said so succinctly in the New Testament book of Romans. Paul writes this letter to the church in Rome. And if you're not familiar, the letters in the New Testament are always, there's people living their lives trying to follow Jesus. First generation followers of Jesus, hearing about the resurrection that we celebrated on Easter, receiving it, becoming what they call born again, like I'm now spiritually alive in Christ. And they're still living their day-to-day lives. And they're trying to figure out what it looks like. And in Romans 13, I think Paul gives, whether you're a Bible reader or not, wisdom we all need to grab hold of. Listen to what he says. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. For whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. Whenever you read in the Bible about fulfilling the law, it would be saying whoever fulfills the law is living righteously. They're living the right way, the way life should be lived. And so Paul's writing to these first century Christians, and he basically says, all right, look around at every relationship in your life. And I'd say the same thing to us. I hope we'll look around at every relationship in our lives and ask, what do I owe? What's on me right now? What do I owe? And then he gets wonderfully specific. Look at the list up there. He starts with taxes. That's, I guess, safe. I don't know. People are like, yeah, all right, taxes. I'll pay my taxes. And then he goes to like wages in essence. And then he turns it to respect. And he turns it to honor. These things that I think are kind of difficult to give people unless we're like certain they deserve it and they've earned it. And I want to encourage you, when you look at that text, the Bible's not being theoretical. It's being practical, I think, to the point of awkward. Because these people, here's how they read the letters, just like we do. They would say them in a big group, but the groups were a lot smaller at the time, and everyone kind of knew everyone really well. So just imagine, I read this letter, and it's like, you have an honor issue with you, and you're known for not paying your taxes, and you have wages you owe them, and everyone's like, oh man, he's just like throwing darts around the room right now. But Paul understood that following Jesus, it's not only about what you believe, like what we celebrate in the resurrection, what we believe about who Jesus is when we say we want to be with Jesus and be like Jesus and do as he would do. Believe was, for almost all of human history, had a small amount to do with what you agree with, and it had everything to do with how you live. And it was inverted now. Believe is what you agree with and disconnected from how you live. So just different times in history, but we have to do the job of pulling those back together. Like Paul encourages us here. Believing is about what you actually do with the people you live with, you work with, you play with, you're around, the people you owe things to. And so I think about what Paul's actually saying here. It's pretty gritty. He says, figure out what you owe and give it. That's the way. That's the life. If you owe your employer something, it's kind of a hard, I don't know, I mean, I'm be vague here, but I'm guessing that we have a hard time giving our employers what we owe them. But Paul gives no quarter on that. He says, you're a follower of Jesus. If you owe your employer something, you give it to them. If you owe your family something, you give it to them. If you've hurt somebody, you give them what you owe. If you owe yourself, I don't know if Paul directly says this, but I think it would be true if we look at the whole scope of Scripture, because you're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. What do you owe yourself that you're not giving yourself? The responsible move is to figure it out and pay it. And then I think it's really beautiful, though, if he continues on. He doesn't stop there with this list of what you owe, right? He ends with this kind of wild phrase where he says, let no debt remain outstanding. Oh, except one, the continuing debt to love one another. It's an interesting challenge that he gives, that the one debt you can never fully pay off is the debt to love one another. So you see the dynamic he puts out there? He says, you need to give everybody what you owe them. That's just how it works. That's what being human means in the way of Jesus. That's going to be how you live your life. You're going to spend your time. You're going to be thoughtful and reflective, and you're going to say, what do I owe? You're going to move away from saying that's on you, and you're going to regularly say that's on me. And then at the end, though, he can't miss this opportunity to challenge all of us to say, oh, one thing, though. You are in debt to everybody to love them. And you can't pay it off. You're just always going to be in debt. You'll never be done. You can't settle the account. Now that's interesting, because if you can settle the account to love, then it's probably not love. It's not the love that Christ talks about. It's something different. The call for us is to be inexhaustible in our day-to-day, one foot in front of the other, willingness to love each other. You just can't settle it, which means, this is interesting, that love isn't like a moment you arrive at, like, finally I can love you. I'm not talking about romantic love here. Finally I can love you. It's actually just an ongoing posture of our lives that we have to maintain. And so how do you maintain it? I want to give you the golden question. It's the impossible question too, right? But it's this: what does love require of me right now? I think it unlocks the whole passage. It's not what do I feel like doing, or what have I already done that I haven't been appreciated for, or no one's giving me credit for, or people haven't noticed the work I've put in. It's what does love require of, and the whole 4 weeks, by the way, it's just going to be like gas pedal down, responsibility, 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 responsibility. So just to prepare us all like mentally and emotionally for the journey. I'm the worst offender, so we can all be clear on that. So you can be like, why are we listening to the hypocrite talk to us about, and it's like, because you're here, you're sitting, I've got the microphone. It's game on, okay? So The question is, what does love require of me right now? What does love require right now in this relationship with this person? Just imagine for a moment. Think about the last complex human relationship or interaction you had. If internally you went and you said, God, I just need your help right now. What does love require of me right now in this moment? Not the same way I'm supposed to pay my taxes, the same way I'm supposed to pay wages, the same way I'm supposed to give honor, the same way I'm supposed to give respect. Wait, that practical. What does it require of me? And I think the good news in all this is this way of living isn't a burden. And I don't know what you think about being an adult. Almost everyone in this room is an adult. But doesn't it feel, and so kids, this is kind of what, when you're an adult, it's just kind of like boring responsibility. All right? That's what being an adult is. All the fun's gone. It's just like now you have to carry the weight of life and you have to take care of your responsibilities. And you can't have fun anymore and whatever. And you know the adults who live the opposite of that. They're not really people you want around a lot, I think. But what if we reframe it? Responsibility is not a burden. It's not this heavy, joyless thing that we carry once we're done being kids. Paul says something much more wild than that. He actually says taking responsibility for your life is literally how you love people. It's where the good stuff is. It's where the joy is. It's where the fun can be had. So taking responsibility is how you love people. So there's our equation, okay? When you take care of your financial life, if you have a family, you're loving your family. When you go back and make something right with somebody that you hurt, you're loving them. You're just taking responsibility. When you ever heard of the doom loop? Some of you have been in different counseling situations. Not doom scrolling, but the doom loop is this idea. It's like where I disrespect you, and so you respond out of that wound in a way that disrespects me, and so I respond out of the wound you've given me in a way that disrespects you, and so you respond, and it's just called the doom loop. And here's the secret sauce for the doom loop. There's no way out of it. It's impossible to get out of it unless one person says, I'm done. I'm not going to disrespect you this time. I'm going to give you what you owe because you're sacred and you're made in the image of God. I wish there was a better way out. I wish it was like 10 times through the doom loop and do this thing and then finally you'll be free. One person just has to say, that's enough. It doesn't mean the other person will change. It doesn't mean their behavior shifts, but you're out of the doom loop, which is beneficial. So what we do is we get honest about the patterns in our lives, about the way that we've been saying that's on you, subtly and quietly, the way we've been taking our responsibility and putting it on someone else and just relocating it. So now it becomes their responsibility to carry. We haven't talked about it to them. No one's agreed on this arrangement. Our actions are what's done that. I mean, I think, just to poke the eye of me, the church culture, this is a real challenge for us. Those of you who are followers of Jesus. Some of you aren't, so you can probably relate to this, but don't nod your head too vigorously, please. We're not necessarily known collectively for being very good at this. It's not like the reputation. Man, I know a Christian, they take responsibility for everything. They give everyone what they deserve. They give honor where it's due and respect. It's just that's not necessarily the reputation. Now, I would contend, I know many of you, if you're in a relationship with someone in this room, I would contend that story is different. And you'd go, oh, I know this Christian, and I like being around them, and I'm glad they work for me, or I'm glad I did business with them, or I'm glad they're my kid's teacher, and you kind of see that dynamic. But collectively, in the cultural dialogue, it's not really the winning argument. And there's a lot of justification for that opinion. So we do this thing where we're going to believe the right stuff about Jesus, and that's what we talk about all the time. That's the main thing. And then, in every possible way, we are going to take responsibility for how we live everywhere we go. Just those two things. hand in hand. There's probably not a better example than this, than the story of Zacchaeus. I bring this story up from time to time. It's in the New Testament. Jesus has an interaction with a man who's a tax collector. Tax collectors and sinners was like a euphemism for trash bags. Like if you were a tax collector and sinner, they were always lumped together. It was actually a phrase in the ancient world that meant, oh, they're tax collectors and sinners. No good. Irreligious. Don't have them around. Don't let them date your kid, whatever. Really bad people, right? So Jesus is coming into town. And Zacchaeus, and many of you church folks know the story. Someone even said we should sing the song this morning. We won't. But Zacchaeus is short in stature. It's a very nice way of saying he's a little man. All right? And Zacchaeus decides he can't see Jesus in the crowd, so he climbs up in a tree so he can see Jesus. And Zacchaeus was a wee little man was he. For those of you who don't know, we have a song about Zacchaeus. Could you imagine being his great-grandkids or something? Like, why is there a song about our grandpa about him being a wee little man? He was a powerful tax collector. Why aren't we singing about that? Okay, he's in the tree. Jesus goes up to him. He says, Zacchaeus, you need to come down. I'm going to your house today. Now, I just want you to see what unfolds as this interaction takes place. Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house. Jesus was always criticized for being a friend of tax collectors and sinners, so this is totally on brand. He goes to Zacchaeus' house. At the house, they're eating. There's no record of Jesus getting up and saying, Zacchaeus, I have some words for you. And he preaches at him. And Zacchaeus is like, the Lord spoke to me. It's just they're having a meal. The religious people are critiquing what's going on. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the meal, watch how Zacchaeus stands up and goes, hey, that's on me. I've been taking my responsibility and putting it on other people my whole life. As a tax collector, what that meant technically was Zacchaeus was fraudulent, unscrupulous. He robbed other people because most of his wages came from overcharging people. So he's not a good guy, right? But just look in this one interaction with Jesus, and you can't pass over. There's a reason it's so iconic. Look what Zacchaeus says in the moment. He says, look, Lord Jesus, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I'll pay them back 4 times the amount. In one sweet interaction, Zacchaeus goes from curiously gawking to see Jesus, this miracle worker, pass by, to having Jesus say, I've got to come to your house. And the outcome, notice Zacchaeus doesn't stand up and say, Jesus, I've heard the 10 points of the argument of your faith system, and I will now make them my belief system. I would like, that's going to be in here. Zacchaeus absolutely believes in Jesus. That's evident in all this interaction. But look how he says, that's on me. How he says, what do I owe the people in my life after a lifetime of taking from them? He says, well, I'm going to give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, and most scholars would say, everyone in the room was like, because that's what he did. He goes, I'll pay back 4 times the amount. He bankrupts himself in that moment. Jesus didn't demand this of Zacchaeus, not that we can find in the text. He didn't tell him, here's your 3 steps to make things right. What you see is Zacchaeus modeling what the way of Jesus has got to be about in our lives, day to day. I think if we sit down and give ourselves enough headspace to start to say, what do I owe? And start to think through the relationships. Start close. I mean, we don't need to go all the way out into the ends. Just start close. What do I owe my sister? What do I owe my kids? What do I owe that group of friends that we were all renting a place together and just kind of blew apart and then we haven't talked in it? What do I owe? And maybe like Zacchaeus, you'll stand up and say, that's on me. The beautiful thing is Jesus says, today salvation comes to this house. That's how Jesus responds to Zacchaeus' action. And you be careful to turn that to go do all the right things and Jesus loves you. But there is absolutely a place where when we have received the goodness of Jesus, our next step is to become wildly responsible people in all of our relationships. That's what salvation can look like. So a couple questions for you. I'm not going to put them on the screen, but I just want you to think about them. Is there someone somewhere who is carrying something right now that belongs to you? And they're, you put it down, and so they had to pick it up. Maybe it's emotional, maybe it's financial. It could be the weight of a relationship that never got repaired and change of pace, time, everything just allowed you to move on from it. Is there someone hoping that maybe, just maybe, you're going to come back and pick up what you put down? Or is there something you're doing right now, or I'm doing right now, that you already know is kind of building toward a mess that someone else is going to have to deal with? You can see it. You probably feel locked up. You don't know how to reverse it, but you can. I mean, Zacchaeus is an example of that. You can pause and go, what do I owe right now in this situation? And then you can just put left foot in front of the right foot and take a step. Because doing nothing is already putting left foot in front of the right foot and taking a step. It's just taking a step toward your responsibility. What would it look like to take responsibility before it lands on them? It's not too late to take it back and say, that's on me. It's not too late. The beauty in all of this, remember, is that Paul doesn't create a list of things you have to pay back. He actually ends with love, the one debt that never gets paid off. So you never run out of opportunities to do it. So I'm just going to leave you with that question. We're going to build on this over 4 weeks. It's just, what does love require of me right now? Put it up, and then we're going to come back and we have a time to share in communion today.
You knew me before I knew myself. You put your breath inside of me. Creation sings of your majesty. We're joining in the symphony, just as oil burns with a fragrance, so let my life be incense, Lord. Oh, just to know you and to be known by you, my God. There's nothing sweeter. Oh, just to sing right to your heart. You raised me, Lord, from dust to life. The Spirit lives inside of me. You call us sons.
I'm just a person, right? So I never know what you get on the receiving end of any sort of message. And if you're feeling like you just want to shut out the whole question and not be part of it because life is real and heavy and complex, I just want to encourage you, like the point is not to fix your stuff or else.